this. Yeah.
Yeah, here we are.
So, what I think we did with enough success previously was get profitably into the weeds about topics of individuality, creativity, idolatry, the nature of technology, and then how all of that's reconciled within a person. And I think we fleshed out those concepts enough that now we can just mention them. Like we can mention idolatry without having to justify why it could apply
Right.
to AI technology in the future.
We've created our own lexicon.
Hopefully. At least for the two of us we have.
Yeah. I mean, we're going to double back on all those topics more than once, but to keep the conversation going, I think it's out there enough.
Yeah. The way that I want to head off this one is focusing on the fusion of organic matter with inorganic matter. Because I'm prepared to say that is ethically not okay.
Right.
It should not be okay. Categorically, a company should not be allowed legally to raise money and work on that and develop that enterprise. Because, well, that's what we can get into. But I'm pretty much coming out of left field with that conviction because we don't look at the Bible and then justify our, even the Western legal corpus is not ultimately suspended by the Bible at this point. It's got all of this weird architecture that I feel like the Jenga tower is sufficient where if we took out the Bible as we pretty much have in our postmodern era, somehow the thing is still standing.
Right.
That's not good, but that's the way that it is.
Right.
So I can't be like, well, I think according to the Bible that we could delineate an ethic that says you cannot fuse organic matter with inorganic matter. If I could do that, which I think we could, that wouldn't have any bearing on what's going on in the world nowadays because of the problem of Moloch that we've explained before, that this is the arms race for the fastest chip, that's the most efficient, it's the most energy efficient. That's the whole mentality. It's not about is this okay or not okay. It's like this is inevitable.
And nobody can afford to not be in that arms race.
Yeah, exactly. That's the problem.
That's Moloch.
Yeah. So we have to we have to decide if we're taking like what neuromorphic chips are doing, which there's so many more videos online where people actually just describe this in detail, but a neuromorphic chip is basically taking brain cells.
Neuromorphic.
Which is there's other words for it too.
Morphosis is to change the neuron, to use a neuron in a different way.
Yeah, that's pretty much the way it's being used. But there's other words to describe it as well. But the idea, because it's kind of tied in with quantum computing as well.
Right. That's what I'm looking up here a little bit, is some stuff related to quantum computing.
Yeah, the general idea is a processor is operating on a digital binary, which is it's a 0 or a 1, and even if there's a billion parameters, you could ultimately zoom in on the microscope, and the farthest you'd get to is a 1 or a 0. It's working with transistors and things like that. And then what a neuromorphic chip is doing.
Well, hold on. So the idea of computing, as I understand it, is because everything is a 1 or a 0, you have to, if there's a billion possibilities in an equation, a computer has to essentially work through every one of those billion possible outcomes. And so if it's a process that requires 10 such calculations, that can be done fairly quickly. If it's a billion calculations to get to the answer, whether it's a 10 or a billion, it still has to work through all 10 or all billion.
Right.
And so the processor speed is the only thing that can make the difference in that. How fast can it work through all of those?
Yeah, and you would say that that's mathematically expensive to do a billion parameter calculation, and it's expensive in terms of energy.
Right.
That's time and effort. So that's work that's being done just to calculate an answer.
And quantum computing shifts that by not based on the ones and zeros per se, but the probabilities. It's able to deal in probabilities, so it's able to compress that linear kind of process that requires on ever faster processors The way this is getting faster isn't necessarily in clock cycles, but at the fundamental level of probability rather than finite outcomes.
Yeah, instead of 0 or 1, there's a
Right.
probability matrix, and
Right.
that's what. So, and this gets to the point of fusing organic matter into this process because that's what a neuromorphic chip is doing to answer that problem. But just to address it at a level so that people can look it up on their own if
Yeah.
they're so inclined. For anything approaching artificial general intelligence, for that to be functioning as such, it needs to have the ability to ratify its own processes. And that means if it has a billion parameters, it needs to do a calculation. I'm introducing this new parameter, and I need to fact check that essentially against a billion other parameters that the system's already running. And so that's a time consuming and energy expensive process, and mathematically expensive, as they would say. So there are systems that have more than a billion parameters. There are systems that have so many parameters, engineers, as they call the black box, of like, we don't know what it's doing. We just know that this is the outcome that we get to.
Which that's actually where AI is right now. They
Yeah.
don't necessarily know. That's why they can't say what the answer will be.
Yeah.
Because a hard-coded algorithm gives an outcome you expect.
Yeah.
This has so many parameters that it's like it has its own personality, but that's just us trying to approximate using anthropomorphic terms.
Right. And that's the case even for the binary systems. They just have reached the nth level of parameters where even though it's just zeros and ones, there's literally so many of them that the people that are building it do not know exactly what's going on.
Right.
So we've already reached this problem of we don't know what we're building. We've already reached the Frankenstein problem.
Which in its own way is a digital kind of ghost in the machine.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. And it may as well be. If
Right.
you don't want to think that that's not there, that is that's the simplest way to explain it.
Right.
To try to be like, well, we do know what's in there. Then why are you calling it a black box?
Right.
That's a place
The
of
most
chaos.
honest of them will say they don't.
It's a place of chaos, right?
Right.
So we are literally creating something we don't understand.
Sorry, I want you to stay on this train of thought,
Yeah,
but
okay.
I'm color commentary here. So my whole point is the metaphor of these systems is rapidly approaching convergence, a high degree of convergence with the human framework as it is.
Yeah.
Based on this idea of the ghost in the machine,
Yeah.
the complex parameters. If I ask you what your favorite color is today, and I ask you tomorrow, it may be two different outcomes because you have a different set of parameters that are too complicated for me to calculate in every instance what that's going to be. And this is these complications are creating that kind of dynamic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's creating that kind of dynamic. And so I think it's helpful to know that this is already the problem with the binary systems, and then we can get to the neuromorphic systems where the problem is exacerbated exponentially. But in the binary systems, you're basically not allowed to fully understand what they're doing because they're so complicated and they're trying to teach themselves. And so you have to allow it to just print code at the speed of light as far as anyone's concerned. And you can kind of do a certain degree of human feedback learning to like make it better, but you have to have faith that it's doing that in the best way. And it's more expensive for humans to be the ones providing the feedback than it is for the AI systems to be the ones to provide feedback for the AI. It's kind of like the problem in Hitchhiker's Guide where they're like, the supercomputer prints the answer to life and it's 42.
Right.
So then the supercomputer says, you should allow me to make a supercomputer and I'll make it formulate the question so that we can get a better answer. That's the problem. That's where
Right.
AI is at right now. AI has told the engineers, I need to be able to ratify myself.
Right.
I can do it better and faster than you. I can ask a better question.
Right. So again, I want to make sure I'm understanding, but the idea behind the issue there is these systems offer so much potential benefit that if we're going to extract that benefit, we can't handicap the process that gives us that benefit.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
if the system needs to self-ratify to give us the ultimate speed, the ultimate answers, the ultimate outcomes, then if we insert human restraint, why build the AI in the first place?
Mm-hmm.
Because the AI itself needs to run unchecked for us to get the most benefit from it,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
That's kind of what you're saying.
Yeah. I mean, and then so what somebody would say, it's not unchecked, like we're still the ones building it. But there's this weird stripping of responsibility that's kind of like, well, if there's a malfunction, that's really like the system's fault that we're trying to improve it. But there wouldn't be like one engineer whose head goes on the chopping block if an AI
Sure.
was to do something damaging or dangerous. It
Well,
would
if you
be
go to a
like, well, that
doctor,
was a fluke. That's a problem within the system. We don't fully understand it. We're trying to understand it our best. It's this weird twisted logic where like what they're creating, nobody is actually fully responsible for. It's like
right,
it's just this team effort, and we're all trying our best. And if there's a problem, we can all like kind of take responsibility for it. But like it might have a problem because it still is growing. So it would be described as like a fluke or this instead of like, Jameson, you messed up. That was your fault.
right.
Because nobody even knows fully. There's no. We've created something that we don't even understand. So how can I take full responsibility for that? I don't even fully understand it.
Right.
Why would I have that much humility to take responsibility for something I don't understand?
So, in a primitive, inaccurate, but maybe still helpful way, if I was to go to a doctor, he gives me a diagnosis. I say, "Thank you. I want a second opinion." He says, "Absolutely." And a clone of him walks in and says, "Let me assess your situation objectively. I'll help." And he gives the exact same diagnosis. That's what we aren't talking about going to some other outside system. We're talking about the same set of AI infrastructures are going to self-govern for us.
Yeah, which is more complicated than, because even as far as that analogy goes, which is really funny, the clones would come in as convincingly different clones. We would not
Right.
discern them to be clones.
Okay.
The AI would say, "Look, I've created this entity which is different than me in a meaningful way, and it ratifies me in a meaningful way."
Right.
But yes, it still is all within the same system.
It's an audit. It's an AI auditor for my process, and this is an AI specialist for my process. This, that, and the other, supposedly convincingly different, but all essentially yielding human sovereignty to the AIs to come up with
Yeah.
the best form of AI on our behalf.
Right, which that's super abstract, but that's the level that we need to be at to make a philosophical fundamental critique of the enterprise. Is to say all AI, it doesn't matter what company you are, it doesn't matter what your motivation is. If you're fusing organic matter with inorganic matter, that should be a defining line. That should be a point of conviction that we don't cross.
So neuromorph.
Neuromorphic chips, yeah, that's what I'm trying to get to.
Okay.
When we have the digital binary chips, that's what they call digital, and now the neuromorphic chip is what they call analog. So analog now means, that used to mean hardware,
Right.
and now in our postmodern diffuse language, analog now means organic matter included in inorganic matter. But like when I was recording music, analog gear was what I couldn't use. I would use digital.
Right.
But now, because analog was the hardware, and now we're saying that the hardware actually includes life. So we're
So the
getting confused on
hardware
what to
is
call it.
now biological.
Yeah, there's that component. So the there's I think people smarter than me would agree, like more privy to what's really going on in the industry, would agree that AGI is not going to be possible unless we have that fusion of organic matter with inorganic matter. So there's just a categorical difference in the processing speed of a neuromorphic chip, which is a technology that literally has brain cells, human brain cells, in the chip, and it uses properties of physics and electrical properties as well. Like I mean, there's people that explain it better than me. So suffice it to say, these neuromorphic chips can utilize voltage gated channels and dynamic properties of physics that basically allow science to run the chip, like the laws of science as we understand the properties of electricity, properties of how voltage is released and how resistance suppresses the release of electricity. All of that is on the same hardware that now living brain cells are a part of, and they're sustained artificially in this environment where the brain is literally doing the processing on this chip. So one example I saw was a video that showed how a brain cell was being trained how to play Pong. The way that this guy was explaining it was like the basically in this example where it's a neuromorphic chip and the brain cell is playing pong, it is identifying itself as the bar. Whereas the digital chip would just be learning how to constrain those parameters most effectively to play the game better.
Right.
So there's already a fundamental difference in terms of how the chip itself is acting. And that's why it processes information so much faster. It learns at a speed, like one company claimed it learns 1,000x faster than another chip.
So now is this in this particular experiment, when you say the brain cell, is this a wire going to a human, but they're just isolating the brain cell and the human's not a part of it?
No.
Or is this a brain cell in a petri dish attached to an apparatus that is independent of?
It's not even. It's literally in the chip. Like yeah, so it's closest to the petri dish with the apparatus.
Okay, there's not a human in this equation. Was the brain cell taken from a human, or was it a stem cell that was turned into a brain cell?
I know, and that's relevant too when you think of morality. Like what if we got it from somebody who had just recently died, but they were a donor on their card?
Right.
Like there's ways that you could justify getting that material.
Right.
That's why I want to come to the conclusion that's just philosophically doesn't matter where you get the material from. If organic matter is being artificially fused with electrically charged inorganic matter to create a life system, then we are corrupting DNA because there's DNA present in the brain cell.
Yeah.
So if there's something with the lifeblood still in it, that principle.
I agree. I'm just curious.
Yeah.
Do you know where they got the?
No, I don't know where they got it from.
Because presumably they could make a stem cell, turn into a neuron.
Right.
But
and let's go with that. Let's say that that's what they're doing.
Yeah.
They're doing it in the most ethical way possible. Right. I'm totally fine giving them that concession and still saying you shouldn't do it.
Right.
Period.
Right.
Even the stem cell whole conversation aside.
Right.
Just the fact that now we're fusing this with the technology that we're training like Neo in the Matrix to learn things that is only possible to learn at the speed that the neuromorphic chip could allow. So one example, like if it's learning 1,000 times faster, the idea is of the problem of Moloch and the arms race of this whole situation is why would we continue investing in digital binary chips for AGI when the concession is we need organic matter to learn faster so that training is more efficient and more cost effective and consumes less energy. That's really what I think is the crux of this whole enterprise is energy efficiency. We want to save energy because that's where we're at right now. The world is on fire and we're all going to die unless we use less energy. So this is actually in the best interest of humans, if you follow my reasoning.
Right.
We need to use less energy. So now we can literally put our brains into computer chips and create a life form of its own that works more efficiently, and that's better for me as a human. That's the line I'm supposed to eat.
Right.
That's what's being fed to me. This is better for me as a human.
Better for me as a human.
Yes.
To fundamentally forfeit my humanity.
Yes. Well, yeah, because what we're doing is what idolatry is, which is sexual, which is we're literally taking our essence and cross-breeding it with something that is inorganic and is literally not alive.
So it's also the entire conversation about AI is the dominoes that are falling that we can identify, and the dominoes that are yet to fall that are just speculative but sure to come. Mm-hmm. So that petri dish, well, that's purely academic. We're just going to use it to solve complex problems beyond our present processing power. But all of those have extended, not just institutional, academic, and industrial applications. They always trickle down into the marketplace. They always become more and more consumer-based. And so we're on a 5 to 10 year journey now to dramatically increasing the likelihood of an interface that now they've solved the human hardware bridge outside of having to test on a human, but we know it can interface because it's got brain tissue in it. And so now why wouldn't I want that direct interface for the next step of human evolution?
Well, it's going to create its own, like in the same way that right now, if you check the box that you're a convict, that you're a felon, there's certain jobs you categorically can't apply for.
Right.
There's going to be jobs in the future. If you don't check the box, you've got a chip in your head, you just can't apply.
Right.
You just can't do the task.
Right.
We need you to do the task. So we can, and it's not going to be racist It's just going to be like you're not in society.
Right.
Why would I hire you? You're not
Right.
plugged in. That's what you
You
literally need
simply
to do
don't have the
this job.
capacity. It's
Those are going to be the jobs that offer the best insurance, that offer the highest, actually a wage you can live off of in this infinitely inflating economy. It's going to be job security. It's going to be social connectivity. It's going to be all the things that we think we need to live. But the catch is you got to plug in. So the we were talking about this earlier, that in the Matrix, like what I saw online. So I want it to be true. I'm going to say it's true.
yeah.
Is that the original script for the first Matrix wasn't where humans were batteries that powered the machine enterprise. It was actually humans were the processors for the machines.
Which personally I think makes more sense as a script anyway.
I think so too. Especially now, it's like okay, it just gives me goosebumps how real that is.
Right.
But apparently the Warner executives were like, that's too heady. Like we got to make this more believable. But yeah, so let's go with the fact that the Matrix storyline is what it is, but the humans that are trapped in the construct are processor units
Yeah.
for the machines. So they're allowed to live their whole lives thinking, I'm thinking for myself. And actually, it's all metadata that's being fed to the machines. That's the ultimate telos of their existence in that reality. So the telos is something we can talk about philosophically. And it doesn't matter where we get the stem cell from or what the application is. If we are recreating live DNA containing human elements and we're fusing them, like the fusion is what I think is difficult to understand, because you're like, yeah, you're just like using the brain cell in the thing and you can get rid of it if you don't want to use it. And this is going to happen on such a scale where there's going to be life forms that literally contain organic matter from humans, and now they're machines. Now they're smarter than you. So like, what the hell are we gonna do
Right.
legally to have jurisdiction over their decisions?
Well, I mean, we can trust the ethic boards.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
No, seriously, I mean, that's part of the conversation. That's part of the point is there is no, I think you mentioned earlier, maybe offline, there is no Geneva Convention for
yeah,
this.
yeah, there's not.
And
Because we haven't had a world war about it yet.
and every nation is in a Molochian arms race to own this space. So it's not like they're going to self-regulate in a meaningful way when trillion-dollar economies are going to be produced out of this.
Yeah.
And the faster you go, the more money you can make, and you can't afford to fall 6 months behind. You can't afford to fall 6 days behind. So everyone is racing full steam ahead. We have this assumed idea that, well, we know the lines we shouldn't cross. We'll know them when we get there.
Yeah, because the anchor point that we're saying is like, we're going to hang the moon, finally. This is it. And so, like, OpenAI is they're attempting to value their shares at 100x the tangible value, because they are like, we're capping our profit at 100x to be ethical.
Right.
Like, how twisted is that?
Right.
That you're like, in my humility,
right,
I will only allow my $80 billion company to maintain the 100x valuation
instead of 1,000.
We don't want greedy investors.
Yeah.
It's so ridiculous, because they're like, this is going to be worth 10,000 what it's worth right now,
Right.
10,000x. So
Right.
let's just cap it at 100. Let's be modest.
Right.
And then let's see how this plays out. But our ego, we're not trying to hang the moon. We're trying to hang the sun. We're literally trying to go all the way to the source of energy itself and being like, that's mine. I can do with that what I want. And the price we have to pay for that, the sacrifice, is living human tissue. That's what it takes. Like, that's our buy-in. So I think that's going to happen at a rate that is, like, it's not going to happen in this way where it just has micro applications. Like you said, it's merely industrial, or it just helps us do some academic planning better. It's like, this is going to happen in a way that actually takes people's jobs, that removes their livelihood, that removes our connection to the literal soil and earth that we walk on. And it's going to require us to participate in a socioeconomic world that is infused, like the borderline between, it's like the missing link will no longer be missing. If like, we're not gonna fail to understand how did we get where we are. It's gonna be like, there's humans and there's human robot hybrids and there's robots, and all along the way is Like there's human tissue that literally connects me biologically to all of these people. I don't want to have a connection to a robot.
Right.
I don't want to see in a robot humanity.
Right.
And I want to ethically say nobody should be allowed to see that.
Right.
I don't want to see a woman give birth after having had sex with an animal.
Right. Right.
I'm not even talking about animal. I'm literally talking about metal.
Right.
I don't want to see that.
Right.
And I'm going to have to see it. I'm going to have to interact with it if I go to McDonald's.
Right.
Like I'm going to have to literally live in the world where that lives. And if I have a prejudice against it categorically, I'm against humans now.
Right.
That's the twisted logic that we're living in, but we're not there yet to the application. I just want to talk about it before we get there.
Yeah.
We're going to get there. Then how are we going to talk about it?
Well, let's talk about how we might get there, and I want to come back around to that. And we need to talk about the movie The Creator maybe in another episode because it's exactly what you just described.
Yeah.
By the end of the movie, you love the robots more than you love humanity. You're thinking they would give us a better world.
Yeah, no agenda there.
Yeah. But just where we are now, 10 dominoes down the line, and let's say the 10th domino is we're wired because this has helped create all the bridges and interfaces necessary. I can have the full access to all human knowledge simultaneous to every thought through this bridge. And why wouldn't I want that? And if I don't, because I'm old school, why wouldn't I want it for my kid to give him a competitive advantage in the workplace or whatever?
Yeah, because that's what you'll need.
So 10 iterations down the line. But what are the steps that would get us there? And this is kind of vile and grotesque to talk about. And it almost conjures strange, like easily dismissed sci-fi tropes.
Yeah.
The brain in the jar in Dr. Frankenstein's laboratory.
Right.
And it's like, well, that was such a primitive, Dr. Frankenstein. I'm thinking young Frankenstein and and so the whole I don't remember if you've seen it, but the whole thing goes wrong because Igor he gave him Abby Normal's brain to put in. He didn't read it as abnormal.
Oh.
He thought it was Abby Normal. Anyway, the idea is okay. Those cells in that construct can do X, and X is 1,000 times greater than what we can currently do.
Yeah, at least.
So now we need to add more.
Right.
We need to add more.
Always in the name of energy.
Right. And before long, it's like, well, why don't we just reprogram an actual human brain? Right?
Well, people will want to. Yeah.
Right.
And so should we be stopping them? They want to do this.
Right, because the brain itself already has all those synaptic pathways and this, that, and the other. And if we're figuring this out, can we leverage the truly gargantuan processing power of the already connected full brain?
That's what I didn't get the chance because I lost sight of that fact. But that is another categorical difference between the digital binary chip that's becoming outdated compared to the organically infused neuromorphic chip. The digital binary chip is abstracting from the human brain how to organize itself in a hierarchy. The neuromorphic chip is literally like their models are like axons, dendrites, synapses. They're literally modeling it after the human brain because it's the most efficient processor that there is. So that's happening at the level of abstraction as far as the planning goes for a neuromorphic chip, and then it's happening literally when they take brain cells that know how to facilitate those transactions. And then the hardware
they're already built for it.
The hardware comes in to power the electricity because it's not biologically alive. It needs artificial electricity to sustain it.
Right.
So there still is that battery power that needs it. It's not blood that powers it. It's a battery.
Right.
But that's really the only difference as far as they're concerned is one, because the point isn't what company's doing this. They're all trying to do it, even the digital ones. But one company I'm thinking of in particular says our goal is to create an artificial brain. We literally want to create a brain. That's what we're doing. So not like with fear and trembling. Maybe we'll get there. It's like they literally are like we want to create an artificial brain.
Right.
And we have two primary goals. I'm not going to say the name of the company, but this is a quote. The guy's like, we have two goals at this company. One is to create an artificial brain, using neuromorphic chips. And then the second goal is to try to understand what we're making.
Oh,
Yeah, two
so
goals.
okay, so
And I'll say this company just did a Series A funding for 25 million. That's their goal, is to create it, and then their goal is
then
to
understand it.
attempt to understand what they're making. And somebody said, "Shut up and take my money.
Right.
Let's get there."
Right. So as they're attempting to create it, there's going to be another company to beat that company that's going to say a human brain is already doing that. We just need to know how to control the human brain in its natural quantum state, because that's what the human brain, it is what you just said, the dendrites, the axons, the synaptic process, the neurotransmitters and the chemical signals that produce many to many relationships that are essentially quantum in its capacity.
Yeah.
I exist and you exist in a state of multiple possible thoughts at any one time.
Yeah.
Because of the way the brain works.
Yes.
And so somebody's trying to recreate that artificially, and another guy comes along and says, let's just take the brain out of this guy, and it's already wired for it. We just need to understand how to rewire it for our purpose.
Yeah, because the quantum reality is saying you can't ever know fully what's going on. Like if you know the speed, you know the rate of acceleration, then you can't know the direction, and vice versa. So we can't, if I wanted to understand you better and I just got all of the, like plugged you in and got all of your data, I would not understand you better.
Right.
Even if it was all being interpreted for me. If I just sit here and look at you, I'm going to understand you the best I possibly can.
Right.
That's because I have a brain too.
Right.
And so we're not just static images, which the digital binary chip, that's something you can just flash freeze in time, so to speak. You can print all that code and you can literally understand everything that it's doing, all the consequences. You can't do that with a brain, because we're not static. Right. And that's a capacity for infinity that is incessantly going on within all of us.
Right.
So
my point in terms of the immediate 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 dominoes leading to the 10th domino of the singularity is now what seemed like a horrible sci-fi trope, a ridiculous kind of horror sci-fi, Dr. Frankenstein,
jar type of thing.
But Matrix, the original Matrix script, it is, well, why not ethically create farms for the brains?
Mm-hmm.
Why not? We see a whole abortion industry that has already persuaded millions to not value a fetus. So why not give that fetus a dignified outcome? Mm-hmm. It's going to be aborted anyway. Let's take that
for the good of all humanity.
For the good of all humanity, let's start harvesting those brains. And because we aren't there yet, that would be ridiculous. But who's to say that we aren't closer than we think in terms of our absolute lack of ethical restraints to pursue that as an outcome?
Yeah, I mean, there's countries that need not be named that purchase aborted fetal tissue for their research.
Right.
I don't know how to assume that that's off the table in terms of how these companies are doing their research. Because again, the point isn't, are they getting it with the most dastardly methods? Are they getting it with the cleanest, most ethically appropriate methods? The point is, fundamentally, we are fusing living organic matter with non-living inorganic matter. And then what our goal is to give that a life of its own. So our goal isn't to have a pet.
And then we'll understand it.
Yeah. Then we'll understand it.
Yeah.
The goal is to do something that we don't understand in the name of energy efficiency, which is not why humans are on Earth. When you have the organic chip, the neuromorphic chip, the abomination, as I want to call it, you have something that is the way that they're creating it is to create a neural circuit. So that's what we say a brain in a jar. That's a neural circuit contained in an apparatus. Now that's the way that people tend to talk about human beings. It's like we're just meat bags, electrically charged meat bags with a brain going on.
Right.
And that's pretty much what we are. So okay, if that's what you think, then there's no qualms putting our neural circuit into it's not a meat bag, it's a metal bag, but we'll just put it in there with the battery pack. That's a neural circuit now. And there's an important distinction between the neural circuit that it literally is in the organic chip and the abstraction of a neural circuit, which it attempts to be in the digital chip. I feel like the point is relevant because the way that we have been doing processor chips so far, even in the pursuit of AGI, we're still abstracting from the human brain how it works and then trying to mimic that in ones and zeros. What these neuromorphic chip producing companies are claiming to do is to literally create a neural circuit. So that means that we are creating a life form, we're creating a personality, but it doesn't have a soul.
Right.
But we are literally creating a life form of its own because like a closed neural circuit has its own temperament, its own personality, its own
Right.
it's closed now. It's not a merely cold abstraction that you can break it all down to ones and zeros. This becomes something where the all of the probability vector is a functionally infinite capacity for reasoning, you could call it. So that's what we're attempting to create, and it's not ironic that we have to use organic matter to create that. So I feel like there's more than one way to say that we're literally creating an abominable form of life that requires living matter, our living matter, to create this fusion. And then the consequence of that is going to be we are not the only sentient life forms on Earth, but we don't understand what we've made. Like that's the story of Frankenstein. That's the story of the Matrix. That's the story of Terminator. We're literally going to create something that we can't control and we can't understand in the name of profit and energy efficiency.
Okay, you just said something that I have. I mean, now I have to go there. Mark 13:14. Now this.